Hello and welcome to the Carolina Snowflakes Podcast, where two Southerners come to terms with their liberal snowflake tendencies. We're your hosts. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Jason. And we're here with this week's episode of the Carolina Snowflakes Podcast. This one is called Catching Up with Q. And obviously, this is a reference to Qanon and all those
that
crazy...
Q. Okay,
yeah, those
I wasn't
crazy people.
sure.
Not the Star Trek Q.
Right,
As I explained before, unfortunately, it is not the Star Trek Q. Mm-hmm. I'd love to do an episode about him, but we're not going to do that here. This is about the group Qanon, and we have already done an episode about them, but it was in October of last year.
2020.
It is our episode number 12. It's called A Definitive Guide to Qanon. You probably should listen to that before this one because it is very explanatory of some of the things we're going to go into here. Some developments have happened. Obviously, that was over a year ago, and some things have changed in the Qanon universe, and we wanted to kind of update everybody. And so this episode is catching up with Q to see where things are at now. Spoiler alert, they're even more of a clusterfuck.
They're even nuttier.
Yeah, so be prepared. But I wanted to start this week's episode a little differently than I started the last one. I think a good idea was pose a little hypothetical question and see where that takes us.
Okay.
So just think about this. So let's say Mitt Romney was the president in 2020 instead of Donald Trump.
Okay.
So Donald Trump didn't win the election. Mitt Romney did. Okay. In that world, put yourself in that world.
Okay.
And coronavirus hits. Mitt Romney, as we know now, would be pro-mask and pro-vaccine. Because he is. So at the time, if he was president, he would have been pro-mask and pro-vaccine. And he probably would have handled coronavirus way better than the orange turd did.
Right, yeah.
So in that case, where Mitt Romney's out pushing masks and vaccines, do you think there would be liberals kind of flirting with the anti-vax, anti-mask movement?
Yeah.
I think there would be some.
Yeah, for sure. Either side's gonna have its like
crazies.
Well, not just crazies, but like anti-authority views. Plus, to be honest, the anti-vax movement pre-COVID,
I picked up a lot of lefties.
Was the lefties?
Yeah, I picked up a lot of them. Right.
You know, the granolas and the woo-woo. Let's rub some essential oils.
As the snowflakes, I would love to say no. Our side would never do that, but I think if you're honest with yourself and you really think about that hypothetical, there would be some lefty nutbags who would be super anti-mask and super anti-vax, and they would be loud and annoying about it.
For sure. Yes.
So I find that really interesting to think about just in general, because that's not what happened. What actually happened was Donald Trump was the president, and all the lefties decided they were pro-mask and pro-vax, and all of the right-wing people decided they were going to go full-on crazy town banana pants.
Pants on head.
Yeah, and just run around like lunatics with no masks.
Yep. And
not vaccinating and dying in droves.
Right, and a significant portion, especially of the extremists of those, tend to be QAnoners.
QAnon followers. That brings us to the whole topic here is that Q has morphed. It is not what it was when we last left Q in October of 2020. It has evolved, and now it's less about babies and more about coronavirus. That has taken over the entire movement. Yeah. And so they're so intertwined that it's hard to separate Q from anti-vax in general. So in the vein of catching up with Q, I thought the first thing to do would be to ask the question, very basic, what has Q been up to?
It's a good question.
It is a good question. And the answer is nothing.
Oh.
Nothing at all. His last post was December 8th, 2020. Oh. So a couple months after we finished our Q episode, Q stopped posting. Coincidentally, that's when 8kun went down, and he hasn't posted since.
What do you know?
Yeah. So there you have it. Just so we know, for the record, it was at 5:05 p.m., and the last thing he posted was a link. It was a YouTube link. It doesn't work anymore if you click the link, but there are alternates. You can find the video on other sites like BitChute. So I found it there, and I watched the video. It's a 3-minute long video, and it's it's the song "We're Not Gonna Take It" by Twisted Sister. We're not gonna take it. And just like Trump propaganda, just like Trump looking awesome, some American flags, some soldiers,
with his,
some fire,
elevated heel shoes,
a bunch of Q-tards,
toupee plastered.
Yeah. It's just that. It's just a propaganda video made by fans. That was the last thing he put up.
Great.
So that was post. That would be post number 4,953 from Q, which is pretty crazy if you really think about it. That's a lot of posts. And he has posted a few things since our last episode that are of interest, specifically to me, that I think are funny or just crazy. So I want to mention a couple of the Q posts that happened since our last episode.
Okay.
They're all pretty much the same, but there's some that stick out. So here's one, post number 4,944. This was on Halloween of 2020. Are you ready to finish what we started? Nothing can stop what is coming is not just a catchphrase. Q. He really insists that this nothing can stop what is coming thing. He was very stuck on that near the end.
Yeah.
And it was like a catchphrase, but then he said it wasn't a catchphrase. And he found an organization. There was an organization that had the same initials. So NCSWIC. It's some branch of the government. And he found that website and was like, oh, it's really an acronym for this. It's just crazy Q shit.
Right.
It's an interesting post from him because I'm like, what do you mean nothing can stop what is coming? What does that mean? But another one is post number 4,933. This was on October 22nd of 2020. And this one says, did Hussein contact Matt Murray in attempt to persuade not to publish? Will Murray follow the truth or buckle to pressure? Oh. DC Civil War. Watergate times 1,000.
Oh,
Q.
Snap.
Now, do you even know what that's referring to?
Well, I know that they refer to Obama as Hussein.
Yes, Q only calls Obama Hussein. So the Hussein in this post is Barack Obama.
And I'm assuming the other person was an alleged tell-all book writer?
You're close. Matt Murray, if you Google him, he's either the editor of the Wall Street Journal or a very famous hockey player for the Toronto or the Canadiens.
I'm going to go with the hockey player.
Yeah, he actually gets the most results. If you Google Matt Murray, he has way more results than the editor of the Wall Street Journal. But I'm assuming Q was referring to the Wall Street Journal and not the hockey player. Mm-hmm. But maybe the hockey player was going to write a tell-all book. Who knows?
He'd be like, you guys will never believe this, but I know what Obama did.
Those were pretty good examples of his like just hyperbole and just over the top crypticness.
Did the guy write anything like about Obama, or was there any kind of book?
No, well, no one knows what he was referring to, right?
Oh,
like there's
so there wasn't actually a.
They can say he decided not to publish, and Q was right because it doesn't say what it is. That's
right. That's how they spin it.
That's how they spin it, right?
Whether the thing comes true or not.
Right. If something negative about Trump did come out in the Wall Street Journal, then he was right. And if something didn't, he was right.
Yeah.
That's the way Q set things up.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it's very manipulative. And then there's another one. This one is really great. This one's the funniest one of them all, I think. So this is Q post number 4,913. This was October 20th, 2020. And this one is interesting. It's a picture of Patton Oswalt, the comedian, taken from his Twitter. Now, on the actual Twitter, it's funny. It's still up. You can see it on Patton Oswalt's Twitter. The caption reads, "Selfie at the Teen Titans Go movie premiere. Booyah." And it's him and his daughter and his wife in the photo taking a little selfie at the theater for this movie premiere. Well, the one that's posted on Q's website, it's tagged as they're at the Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, California. But on the Q post, the caption reads, "Went on a hunt and caught this tasty morsel. Booyah." And his little daughter's right beside him, so the implication is there. And then the location is Comet Ping Pong. And if you remember, if you're not familiar, Comet Ping Pong is where Pizzagate happened. Oh. That is the place that they... before Q even existed, were saying was moving children throughout, trafficking children.
Yeah, it was a pizza restaurant.
It's called Comet Ping Pong
in DC. That these folks alleged Hillary Clinton was trafficking children through in the basement or something.
And a guy went there and shot it up.
A guy from North Carolina.
Yeah.
went
and then
there.
In 2019, a guy tried to set it on fire.
Yeah.
So
was this post accusing Patton of being involved in child trafficking?
Yes, Q basically posted either he photoshopped or someone photoshopped the real Patton Oswalt tweet of him at the movies taking a selfie just changed the text and the location to make it imply that Patton Oswalt had gotten this young girl that is his daughter from Comet Ping Pong.
That is so messed up.
Yeah, and remember, this is October 20th, 2020. How many years after Pizzagate? Like 6?
Several.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So they're still on that. That's what I found interesting about that one. And it's funny when you're scrolling through Q's posts and you see just all this crazy random stuff and a lot of links, and then all of a sudden there's Patton Oswalt.
Yeah, of course you're going to stop and be like, excuse me?
Out of nowhere, yeah. What? So I just found those to be some of the more interesting posts that he's done since we last left Q.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and his last one is a fan video of Twisted Sister, so.
And nothing since.
Nothing since. Nothing since then.
Well, I do know that although they haven't been Q dropping, they've still been gathering.
Yeah, they have.
In fact, they had planned a convention next month in October in Las Vegas.
Okay.
To be called the Patriot Double Down.
All right. Yeah. Well, I like the Vegas pun. I'll give them credit for that.
Yeah. They were touting it as the Great Awakening weekend.
Yeah, they've been waiting on that.
Oh yeah, and tickets were on sale for between $650 and $3,000.
Ooh.
And they were expected to have speakers including Michael Flynn and 8kun website owner Jim Watkins.
Yeah.
And I'm referring to this in past tense because it got canceled.
Right.
By Caesars Entertainment.
Yeah, they don't want nothing to do with it.
Well, actually, they did.
They want the money.
They wanted the money. They have historically been pretty like hands off in saying,
right.
It's
Vegas.
Yeah, we host these things. It doesn't mean we endorse them. But they were getting all kinds of like social shaming and phone calls from all sorts of important people being like, you cannot let this happen.
Well, yeah, can't let these nuts be attached to your place.
We're in the middle of a pandemic, and these are the same people who spout plandemic nonsense. You cannot let this happen.
Yeah.
And so Caesars was like, okay, and they canceled it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing that happened recently is HBO put out a documentary called Into the Storm that's about QAnon. And they all but definitively prove that Watkins is Q, or at least has written a lot of the Q posts by analyzing his own writing and things that Q has brought up. It's at least, and as far as I'm concerned, beyond a doubt that it's him.
I think it probably became him.
Yeah, I don't know that it was always him, but it's him now, I think.
Yeah.
Or, well, it was up until December.
Right.
We'll see what happens. If anything changes with Q posting, we'll be sure to let you guys know.
Yeah, we'll stay on top of that.
I'm sure it'll be some kind of bullshit, but there you go.
Honestly, if I could ask Q one question, it would be, why isn't Donald Trump president again?
Right. I certainly think Watkins, at least both Ron and Jim, have posted a lot about him getting reinstated, but they both quit posting after Biden had been in office for a little while. So
it was a recurring thing over and over and over. They kept predicting these dates when Trump would be reinstated.
Yeah.
And I have watched each of those dates come and go. And he's still not there.
Yeah. I don't know what their answer to that would be. I guess they always turn it around, so it would probably be something like, yeah, that's just proof that the plan is coming. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you're right.
It somehow proves that he's real, because that's how they do with everything. But it's interesting that they probably also would move the topic, because they're not really that obsessed with baby eating elites anymore.
Like the baby eating elites are still kind of...
It's part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an undercurrent that's always there.
But it's not the driving force anymore.
It's kind of a rallying cry, too. Like I think when they start to feel that they're falling apart, they can rally on that.
Yeah.
On that, like, let's save our children.
Yeah. I actually have a little bit more info on that than I did in the last one, too, to update. I learned a little bit about what they think is happening, and it's that you can, if you torture a kid and kill it, you can get their adrenaline gland.
Oh.
and drink what's called adrenochrome, and that helps keep you young somehow.
Right.
You may have heard the term adrenochrome before if you've seen the lovely film Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas or read the book. Hunter S. Thompson made that shit up, like that you could harvest an adrenaline gland from a human and use it as a drug. He just made that up. It's not true. There is truth that they can get adrenaline out of human adrenaline glands, and they do, but you don't have to be alive for them to get it. You can be dead, and you
don't have to be a tortured child.
No, you can just get it from a dead body. And what they use it for is to like help restart your heart when you're overdosing and things like that.
Right.
So I find it really interesting that they stole their whole baby eating thing from Hunter S. Thompson. Like, you were believing that guy for facts? Yeah, well, that tells you something about it. But yeah, now they're all on this coronavirus thing. That's the main train. They're anti-vax, anti-mask.
Yeah, they believe that it's a hoax or that it's all a plan to control and make us into sheeples. Sheeples. I guess.
Yeah. I had a coworker actually ask this interesting question. He asked, well, if it's supposed to be mind control, but we all went and signed up and got it, why do they need it? They already control us. Why do they need to mind control us if we all went and got the vaccine without them asking?
I feel like that is such a good point.
It is a really good point.
We're already controlled.
Yeah, the people who would show up to get your shot to mind control them are already mind controlled by you. Yeah. It's like a catch-22 that I would love a Q follower to actually answer if there's any listening.
I guess they would say, yeah, exactly, and we're not going to be a part of that.
I hope that's what they would say.
I guess.
But it's a really interesting question, because then what would be the point of enslaving people who are already enslaved?
So not only though in denying the vaccine and denying the efficacy of wearing masks, they're also just spreading misinformation.
A lot of it.
About the disease and about the pandemic. And as a result, a lot of them are dying.
Yeah.
And
the numbers are pretty bad.
Yeah. And they're not only just like dying, they're going to their graves denying that COVID is real.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Can you fathom?
No.
Being a Q-tip and getting COVID. You're unvaccinated, so you get real sick. You go to the hospital. They come in, tell you you've got COVID. You tell them COVID's a hoax. Then they tell you they got to put you on a ventilator. And you say it's not real.
Yeah. And then you die. Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a stupid hill to die on.
Right?
Like,
for no reason.
Of all hills.
And you're leaving the rest of your family here to be like, oh, yeah, he was real dumb.
Yeah.
I mean.
Bobby was real slow.
Yeah. You know? I mean, they're left sitting with that, which is insane.
In fact, late August, a guy named Robert David Steele, who was a former CIA officer turned QAnon nut, died from COVID.
Okay.
In much the same way that I just described.
Wow.
And this guy, so Steele has a really fascinating story. I mean, it's easy to just kind of think like, oh, QAnon and dismiss.
Yeah, I think he was just some right-wing nut living out in New Mexico.
But he wasn't.
Yeah.
He really was former CIA.
That's crazy.
And he was also a former Marine.
He knew too much.
He did.
Yeah.
He, in the early 90s, took on a mission of open source intelligence.
Yeah, OSINT.
Yeah. He literally wrote the book on it.
That's crazy.
He wrote the book that's used today by NATO and by intelligence officials. He hosted a huge conference in 92 with like 600 or something world leaders to talk about open source intelligence. He had gotten permission from the feds to do this.
For the listeners, open source intelligence, if you didn't know, is basically researching things on platforms that are open. So if I want to do, research on you as a person, and I use LinkedIn, Facebook, all the things that are open to do my research on you, that's generally what's called open source intelligence.
Right. It's gathering of data and information done transparently.
Yeah, that's freely and open.
Yeah. And it's like, well, that unto itself is not so bad. Like, I kind of think that's sort of cool.
Well, it got him thinking into crazy kind of ways, I guess.
Yeah, well, after he hosted that first conference, the CIA was like, you're never doing that.
Yeah.
You're never doing that again.
We don't want people knowing that.
Yeah. But so he's like, he was a very smart guy.
Clearly.
A prolific reader, too. Here's a random fact about him. He was the #1 reviewer on Amazon for nonfiction titles.
Wow.
He was a prolific reader.
Yeah, it had to be.
But then, so his like kind of propensity for extremism turned towards the world of QAnon.
You know why I think that is? Because if you read that much nonfiction, you start to get bored and you start to look for the most extreme shit because that's the only thing that entertains you anymore. You can only read so much about Abe Lincoln and Ben Franklin before you start to want to kill yourself.
Yeah.
As interesting as it is, you start looking for something more interesting. And when he found Q, it was like, oh shit, this is interesting.
Yeah, and he, after finding Q, is one of the reasons why QAnon and all the conspiracies surrounding it found its way to the mainstream onto platforms like Facebook.
Wow.
He was the kind of connector.
Yeah, and he knew exactly how to do it too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So he gets COVID.
Yeah.
After, actually, he claimed to be the first person to ever say that COVID-19 was a hoax. So he was, not vaccinated, didn't wear a mask, all that. So he gets COVID and winds up very, very, very sick.
Yeah.
And on August 17th, he wrote his last blog post. And part of it said, I will not take the vaccination, though I did test positive for whatever they're calling COVID today. But the bottom line is my lungs are not functioning.
Wonderful.
So he knew he was sick. He felt like ass.
He
was about to get put on a ventilator, but it wasn't COVID.
And then he died.
And then he died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he dies. And of course, the Q-tips can't just leave it at that. So there's conspiracies surrounding his death.
Yeah.
One is that the reason he died was because the doctors refused to give him hydroxychloroquine. Which,
they needed for lupus.
Misinformation campaign. And then others said that he was, snuffed out by the feds for
running his mouth.
All that he knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like kind of a sad story in a way because it sounds like the guy was really smart, but went way wrong.
Way wrong. Scarily wrong.
Yeah. And he was like on the Alex Jones info wars all the time.
Right.
And before he died, he was actually on a speaking tour across all 50 states.
Why not?
To talk about COVID and what a hoax it is and talk about Trump and Trump coming back to being president and all that and election fraud, etc.
You know what occurs to me is you said he claimed to be the first person to claim that COVID wasn't real. That's kind of like being the first person to die from having a generator inside your house from carbon monoxide poisoning. I don't know that that's something to be proud of.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, there'll be a lot after you and they're all just as dumb.
So he was on this tour. He was in Florida when he got sick and died. And if being on that tour wasn't wacky enough, he was joined on the tour by a guy named Richard Mack, who is the head of the Constitutional Sheriffs.
Can we call him Dick Mack?
Dick Mack.
Yeah.
Which is a movement working to radicalize American law enforcement.
Yeah, let's do it. So
these two were going from state to state talking about election fraud, COVID's a hoax.
That's hilarious.
Cops should beat black people.
Yeah, we really need them more radicalized. That's the problem with cops. They're too center.
Yeah, right. They need to beat more.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's about as funny as Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz going around accusing the Democrats of being child molesters.
Yes.
That's a level of irony I can't really even comprehend.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
So then he died.
Yeah, he did. A lot of them have.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting is that they haven't all just done violence to themselves, like in this case. There have been some Q followers who have done some violence against other people, and they're very, very dangerous. And we've been making light of QAnon and Q followers this whole episode because a lot of them are goofy, but a small percentage of them are very, very dangerous and have done some really crazy things. So I have a couple of things here that I'd like to mention done by avowed Q followers that you might not have heard of. On June 15th, 2018, a guy named Matthew Wright drove an armored vehicle that he had made in his mom's backyard to a bridge near the Hoover Dam and blocked both lanes of traffic on the bridge.
I remember that.
And basically, he yelled at officers. He live streamed himself while he was doing it. They surrounded him like crazy. There was like an hour-long standoff. He eventually tried to drive away. They got him with stop sticks. He wrecked his car. Inside of his car, they found 2 rifles, 2 handguns, and 900 rounds of ammunition.
Dude.
And he pled guilty to terrorism charges and serves at least 10 years in prison.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. On June 11th, 2020, a Boston man led police on a 20-mile car chase while live streaming himself talking to Q. This guy, his name was Alphys Slyman, which is a weird name, but what he said on the video, you can't find the video anymore. It's funny. I saw it around when this happened, but I looked for it and couldn't find it. So I'm going to have to just do an impression of him. But this is this crazy man driving down the road. Donald Trump, I need a miracle or something. QAnon, help me. QAnon, help me. He pronounced QAnon because he was that new to the movement. He was so new to QAnon, he didn't even know how to pronounce the name of it correctly. And yet, he took police on this police chase. He was 29 years old. He had 5 kids in his car, aged 13, 5, 2, 1, and 8 months old.
Oh, my God.
They were in the car yelling. He was screaming, driving down the road, live streaming that Donald Trump needs to be back in office, and it's been too long, and Q promised us, mispronouncing QAnon. The kids can be heard in the background saying, like, we don't want to die, which is crazy. He ended up wrecking. None of them got hurt. But he did tell them during the chase that the cops were going to come abduct them and sell them into sex slavery, and that they either were going to do that or shoot them and kill them.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Well,
guy.
I see why the video might be hard to find these days.
Yeah. I saw.
You're dealing with minors and.
Yeah. When this happened, the video was kind of going around, but I couldn't find it anymore. I'm sure I could if I looked long enough, but I didn't feel like it. I've seen it before. July 3rd, 2020, Corey Huron, a reservist for the Canadian Rangers, allegedly rams a truck through the gates of the Prime Minister's residence in Ottawa. This dude posted all kind of QAnon shit on his forums, and he was also big into the Bill Gates created coronavirus side of the things. And he rams his truck through the gate of the Prime Minister. He was a reserve player for Canadian hockey team. That's Canadian hockey getting brought up again.
What?
I know. Maybe Q needs to look into that.
This is a theme.
And then August 12th, 2020, a Texas woman is arrested after allegedly chasing and crashing into a car, then telling police she thought she was chasing a pedophile.
Wow.
Cecilia Fulbright, who was 30, was arrested in Waco, Texas. Waco, where dreams come true. After 2 drivers reported being chased by another driver. One reported being repeatedly rammed by another vehicle. Officers said that Fulbright told them afterwards that she believed the driver whose car she hit was a pedophile and that she was rescuing a young girl from being trafficked.
Oh, wow.
Her blood alcohol level was at least 3 times the legal limit when she was arrested. She says she's still a Q follower and that Donald Trump is helping taking down the pedophile ring, and that's all she was trying to do.
Goodness. Wow.
So that's just a few examples. There's actually been over 79 Q followers that have been arrested since 2018 for violent crimes. 45 of those were on January 6th. The other 35, I guess, would be people who committed crimes outside of that, like the ones I just listed.
Wow.
And those are just some examples of how these people are violent and dangerous. Yeah. So that's pretty extreme. So let's get to where they're at now. I've got this article from recently. You actually sent it to me. It's a very funny article because it looks real. It's on a website called foreignpolicynews.org, which sounds very official.
Yeah.
And the headline even sounds like something you'd see in like Wired or something, right? It says, "Beware the transhumanist, how, quote, being human, unquote, is being re-engineered by the elite's COVID coup."
And it does. It looks like a news website.
That headline, like, that could be like hyperbole you would see in another article that would justify itself somehow. So you're like, okay, I'm curious, what's this going to say? And it starts off pretty tame. It says transhumanism is a set of beliefs based on the premise that human beings can be improved by genetic manipulation and or implanting technologies into the brain and body to achieve enhanced capacities, which is a sci-fi trope. I mean, people have been talking about cyborgs since science fiction was invented.
I mean, it also has a little touch of reality in it in terms of like eugenics and...
Yeah, and it has a little bit of touch of reality in terms of prosthetics.
Yeah.
We've been giving prosthetic limbs to people for a long time. So this idea isn't very new.
And there's always kind of been like a, I don't know, sort of a fear sort of threat of like government controlling, you know.
So we're still in rational
birth
land.
and genetics.
Yeah, we're still in rational land, but the next sentence takes us off into where I start to think we're going to crazy town. So transhumanism has a long history as an idea, but since 1990, it has attracted serious attention from an increasing number of technology lovers, and early advocates are readily identified. Now, that's an interesting sentence. What do you mean technology lovers and early advocates are regularly identified?
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either. Do you mean like Elon Musk because he's like on TV not blasting himself into space?
Yeah.
I'm very confused by what that sentence is supposed to mean. But apparently it's a professional thing here because next they want you to get to know the writer of this article.
Oh, good.
As part of his research as an investigative reporter throughout his life, which included writing a comprehensive expose of how the AIDS hoax was perpetrated in the 1980s, in 2001, John Rappaport interviewed a Cold War-era propagandist turned anonymous whistleblower who had spent decades working for the medical and other cartels to promote their agendas and gain increasing control over the human population.
Well,
there's a lot in that.
That is an incredibly long sentence. But honestly, it lost me at AIDS hoax.
Right. So apparently this author, his claim to fame is writing a comprehensive expose of how the AIDS hoax was perpetrated. I don't know what that means because AIDS wasn't a hoax.
Apparently it was.
Yeah.
Who knew?
And apparently his name's John Rappaport, so don't look that guy up. He's a piece of shit, apparently. And I don't know, he apparently interviewed a Cold War era propagandist turned anonymous whistleblower who worked for medical cartels.
What is the medical cartel?
I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Okay.
But there's a quote from him about it. So this is what this Cold War era dude had to say.
Okay.
He said, "Look at the medical cartel. Do they ever declare victory? From now until the end of time, they'll be planting stories in the press about the latest medical advance that will make life better for every person in the world. Most of it is a lie, but that doesn't stop them. Until the planet is depopulated down to under 1 billion people and everyone left is a robot, these cartels are not going to quit. And even then, with a lobotomized world, they'll still push their propaganda. This is 1984 and the people better realize it. The medical cartel, they're planning to take over the mind, after which PR won't really matter."
What? Okay. So, what?
He defines the cartel as government, intelligence, media, medical, military, and money. I don't know what that means either. But there you go. It sounds like just crazy rambling, right?
Yeah.
I have one last paragraph of it, and then we're going to really rip this apart because it's pretty terrible.
Okay.
So, however, just as the, quote, AIDS epidemic, when no HIV virus was ever scientifically demonstrated to exist... I don't know where he gets that from.
Somebody, does Fauci know about that?
Yeah. There is zero science to prove the existence of the virus labeled SARS-CoV-2. Instead, this elite coup is being designed and conducted to achieve a profound transformation in the nature of the human individual and human society, including a substantial depopulation. Moreover, the proceedingly rapidly because it entails a complexity and depth that is not easy to comprehend, but it also becomes so preposterous that few people are inclined to contemplate the possibility objectively. So he's admitting there that this is all so crazy that very few people would even listen to it. I'm surprised we did.
We both read the whole thing.
What I find hilarious about it, though, is this really blatant contradiction that's in there where they're saying that coronavirus was engineered so that they could turn us into robot people and control our minds, but also depopulation. What's weird about that is it's not that good at depopulation. If it want to get the Earth to under 1 billion people, coronavirus is not going to do that.
Yeah. Their multiple angles don't add up.
Right. So it's not going to really work for depopulation. And if it's supposed to be for mind control, I present to you the question I had earlier about, well, the only people who are going and getting the vaccines, minds are already controlled. So the whole thing doesn't make any sense. Also, the whole stuff about AIDS, I don't understand what they're talking about there.
Yeah, they're denying that it was ever real, I guess.
Yeah, but this is something that Q people would read. This is a QAnon anti-vax news article that you can find.
They believe that the virus, that COVID was manufactured and that the pandemic was manufactured and that it's all an effort to ultimately reduce the world population and to turn whoever's left into soldiers.
Yeah.
Like genetically modified soldiers.
What a crazy, I mean, like.
For the global elite.
Mm-hmm. Who are apparently baby-eating lizard people.
Yes.
And they have Jewish space lasers that start the California wildfires, apparently.
I don't know about you, but I don't feel like a soldier.
I don't either.
I don't really look good in camo.
I don't feel like I'm a robot either.
But I would rather sit on the couch than like go to fight.
So if you have anybody in your life that's a QAnon follower that flirts with these ideas, this is where they're at.
Yeah.
I just wanted to catch everybody up with that. I think it's important that we all understand how fucked up this is.
Yeah.
And to kind of close it out, I wanted to say, over a year I've been researching this and following this. I mean, obviously a year ago I was ready to present a report on it. Mm-hmm. So I feel a little bit qualified to answer the question of what QAnon is. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people want to ask that question, and I've defined it in a lot of ways. A lot of people have, but I think there's a few distinct categories of things that it is kind of. It's not one thing. I think QAnon's a new thing that we're going to have to come up with a new word for. I can't be the one to do that. I don't have enough success. Maybe if this podcast goes viral, then we'll talk.
Yeah, we're not like famous enough to name it.
But what I can say is that it seems to be a mixture of these following things. Okay, so it seems to be a cult. A lot of cult experts have written about it in terms of a cult.
A lot of people consider it to be a cult just in terms of what it does to followers and as far as like kind of brainwashing. Yeah, a lot of this really is it's less my take on it and less I've seen what experts tend to get interviewed when they talk about QAnon. Yeah. Another one is religion. So it has a lot in common with a cult, except it lacks the charismatic leader. You can't say Q's charismatic and he's not a leader because he hasn't even posted since December. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't fit cult because of that one thing. It's weird. And it doesn't really fit religion because it doesn't have established buildings or exemption or any kind of thing like that, an established hierarchy. But it does have a lot of religious overtones. Oh, yeah.
So, there are people who look at it as a religious angle. Another thing that QAnon seems to resemble are these things called ARGs or alternate reality games. A lot of them have been like multimedia, like puzzle finding clue missions that they do where you search the whole internet. It's like a scavenger hunt with the whole internet as your playground. Right. I think we mentioned that in our last QAnon episode about how it could appeal to people who like to solve puzzles. Right. Or like riddles or like decode things. Yeah, decoding things. Yeah, like that. There's a lot of these games where you go to one website and it flashes a Morse code that if you figure out, it takes you the URL to another one that shows you a QR code that if you scan takes you to a picture that if you turn the alpha all the way down, you can see another code that takes you to another website. It just keeps going. And those can be really, really fun. And Q is very much like one of those. Yeah. And I think if you ask people who are experts in ARGs, they tend to think that it basically that's what QAnon is and has been from the beginning. It's just one people tend to believe because they're idiots. A psychological operation is another thing QAnon is considered to be. A psyop. A psyop, which is, a government operation where they tend to deal with psychology. So they might do a false flag event, if you've ever heard of that, is what would be termed a psyop.
So they think it's actually the government?
Right. That it's some government entity that's trying to control the psychology of some population.
Or conducting some kind of test
right.
experiment.
It's interesting because people have conspiracies about both. That it's a psyop from the left to make the right look bad, or that it's a psyop from the right to try to confuse everyone on the left.
I personally love it every time the right gives credit to the left for being
that smart.
Yeah,
I know, because we're not
devious.
Yeah.
I'm like, thank you. Thank you.
There's a couple more types of experts that'll tell you something about QAnon. That's computer security people. A lot of people consider QAnon to just be a massive computer security threat. If you're Zuckerberg, you kind of look at it that way.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying, but
it's like a financial
really.
computer issue, though, is what I'm saying. It's very much focused on computers.
It's more of a money issue for him, I think.
Yeah, but it's all centered around this internet. And then experts on Russia say that it could be a big Russian way to fuck with us, which they're really good at.
They're incredibly good at it.
And a lot of them get paid to do it.
Yeah.
So
I don't know that it's necessary. I wouldn't necessarily say that it is Russia, but I could absolutely see Russia being like
they're not helping it.
No, they are pushing it right along,
shoving coal right into that engine. That's what I think too. And see, all those are very different things, but all of those really describe QAnon pretty well. And I've read articles and books from experts about each of those things, comparing them to QAnon, and they all sort of make sense in a way, which means we need a new word. It's a computer cult of religion game psyop Russia.
That's his password, by the way.
Yeah, there you
go.
For
all logins.
But I think, that's what blows my mind about it, is that it is such a big, massive, crazy thing. And if you wanted some other interesting statistics about how many people actually believe this, there are millions. There are millions of Americans that are QAnon believers.
Yeah, and I think the reason why there are so many is because Q is the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And it goes from like the mildly crazy, but good intentioned, to the extreme far side of anti-government, militia, sovereign citizens.
Yeah.
Can't tell us what to do.
And a lot of those people don't even realize they're in the same thing as QAnon.
Exactly.
Which is even crazier.
We talked about that in our last episode.
Yeah, who have been in QAnon without knowing they're even in QAnon.
Your grandmas and stuff on Facebook sharing those Save Our Children hashtags, and they don't know they're participating in QAnon.
Yeah. It's like we should call it a shit cult. It's like, it's even worse than a cult. It's a digital shit cult. That's my word.
I like it.
Digital shit cult is my word for it. They do call themselves digital soldiers. Mike Flynn tweets about that all the time, by the way. And that was another one accused. Last post was some tweet from Mike Flynn about digital soldiers. Yep. So it's a digital shit fest, and I hate it. And they're dangerous. And we really wanted to bring more awareness about what these people actually are.
Yeah, and we'll have to catch up with them again in a year.
Yeah, we'll see where they're at again in a year. Who knows? But this was our catch up, and I think it was great.
Good job.
Yeah. If you thought it was great and you want to hear more of our episodes, you can find them on our website at
carolinasnowflakes.com.
Or you can get on Facebook, speaking of Zuckerberg, and you can interact with him, apparently, and us.
But not Q. Facebook.com/Carolina Snowflakes.
And if you want to send us an email, if you are a Q follower, I would love, oh God, would I love to hear from you. I have a lot of questions. So I'd love to get an email if you are, so.
carolinasnowflakes@gmail.com.
gmail.com.
Thanks for listening. Bye.